Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Manitou Community Arts Center Blacksmith Shop and Forging area. Today I'm going to give you a tour, show you some equipment, show you some safety things with this. If you've ever worked with metals or you've wanted to, this is the place to really unlock your creativity. You can take steel and shape it just like clay with the proper tools and proper heat. So we're going to do that today, and I hope you enjoy it. I just want to show you around the shop first and give you a layout of it. When we come through the gates here, we have an anvil right here. We've got some tongs and hammers over here, and there's another anvil. This front area is open for the art center for forging, and anything behind this line and behind this table, this is all my private studio. I've designed it where if I'm working out here and somebody is also working, they can ask questions and I can give tips and things. What's available to you in the shop? You've got this anvil, a vise, hammers, tongs, this other anvil here if two people are working, and then off to my right is the forge. All right, now's a good time to just go ahead and start talking about safety. First of all, the proper attire for forging. You want cotton clothes. You don't want to wear synthetics. You don't want to wear sandals like I'm doing now. So right now I'm making a video, I'm not doing any forging. You want closed-toed shoes and no synthetic clothing. And the reason I say that is that synthetic clothing, if you hit it with hot metal, it'll actually melt to your skin. So definite no-no in the shop. We don't want that. But yeah, so I got my sandals on while I'm doing this video and tour. I'm gonna put my shoes on when we get into the actual forging videos. All right, I've repositioned the camera a little bit so you can get this side of the shop. Over here behind this swinging gate, here's the fire extinguisher. So it's right here outside of the shop so you can access it easily. There's another fire extinguisher through the door into the Mac area. That's an important thing to have. Yeah, here's the anvil there. And yeah, that's really it for this side. So one thing you want to do, especially over here, we've got everything lined in metal, but especially at the bottom, you don't want leaves and things to build up. So when you come in the shop, check for leaves and sweep everything out, because behind this is a wood fence and we don't want that catching on fire. Clean up around the bottom every time you come out. Check that. Okay, I wanted to show you this. So we put this up. It makes everything really easy. Every time you come out, you have a checklist of how to open and run the forge, the basic safety things, and then how to shut it all down. So all you have to do is follow that checklist. I'm going to run through these real quick. Check in at front desk, clear area of flammable items, which we just talked about sweeping up and things. And then the next steps are actually running the forge. I'm over here at the forge. I'm going to show you like this hose that comes off of the forge and comes all the way over to these two propane tanks. So this is going to be our supply of fuel for the forge to heat it up to work our steel. Okay, so what I have here is two propane tanks tied together so that when you run them, the forge doesn't freeze the tank. If it was a single tank, the forge pulls propane so fast that it'll actually freeze it. And that's not dangerous or anything, it just makes it where the flow is reduced and you won't be able to actually forge with it. Propane forges are extremely simple, just like grills or stoves. You're just taking propane gas and shooting it through this tiny hole and mixing it with air, and it combusts, and that's it. So I'll show you a little bit about that. But here we have a pressure regulator that's adjustable. On the checklist, I have the intended run pressure, which is about 8 psi on this forge. You can adjust it, but clockwise to increase and counterclockwise to decrease, and it has that labeled on here, and you can see. You're not going to get a pressure reading until these tanks are turned on, and now I can see that it's sitting at about 9 psi right now. What I've done is I've made it where the hose is out of the way of the forging area, because you don't want to get hot metal on the hoses and melt them and then create a fire in that way. Okay, so we want to keep all the heat away from these hoses. I've got it hanging up so that it's off the ground right now. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a closer up view of this. The two tanks. To open the tanks, you turn these counterclockwise. To shut them, you turn them clockwise. Most people are probably familiar with that. using grills and other things. Here's a look at the regulator. You can go up or down, and there's the needle, 0, 5, 10 psi, and up. You don't really want to run it over 10 to 12 psi. Okay, now to look at the forge itself. So we have the actual forge, and then over here I have a lot of scrap material that you're welcome to use and work with. It's all steel in different shapes and sizes. So the actual forge, let me see here. Okay, got a good view of it. So this is the actual burner. So we just talked about how the rubber hose leads from the 2 tanks, and it comes into this ball valve that turns it on and off. Okay, so off is pointed like that, and that's on. So on is in line with the hose. All right, so it's very simple. Propane comes in through here, you turn it on, and that allows it to go through these fittings into this chamber. And if you can see through here, I'm going to open this chamber up, and it's just a straight shot through there. It's just a tube, and inside the tube is a welding tip that's got a tiny hole and it's shooting propane through. So what happens is air comes through these holes in this grate, and the propane comes through that tip, and they mix, and when they reach this part and you light it, they combust. So you have to have air coming through and mixing with the propane. If this is totally shut, you won't have any air actually coming through. It'll just be propane. So it won't actually combust here at the nozzle. It'll have to go out of the forge and reach oxygen to combust, and you do not want that. What'll happen is there'll be huge flames shooting out with smoke and stuff. So you always have to have this open. So how far do you open it? Just about that far, just about 1/2 inch. These are designed where you can regulate the airflow to get an oxidizing or reducing flame. You really don't have to worry about that too much. Very simple device. So this is just a key that I made when the other one broke, so that you can easily open and close this valve. This really generally doesn't get very hot. And then this goes into the actual forge body and sets in there, and there's a hole and it goes through here. I'm gonna move these bricks and show you what the actual forge body looks like. All right, so this is a ceramic wool lining with a castable refractory over top of it, and this just provides insulation so that the forge can get up to operating temperature. I built it in a way where this is modular, and if you had to or you wanted to, you could put another top to raise or lower it. It's just an insulated chamber. This part I made so that if you have long pieces that you need to rest. Give you an example. Say you have this in the fire and you need to rest that on it. This one's okay, just lay in there, but if you have a long piece, you may want that. And you can adjust that a little bit, and you can take it out if you need to. So if you take it out, you can actually just flip it around like that. That way you can just use the forge. All right, let's light this forge. Okay, so first things first, we're gonna open the air 1/2 inch. It's very important, don't forget that step. The next thing is hold a lit lighter inside the forge, and then I'm just gonna ease open this ball valve a little bit, and now I can open it fully. Okay, so right now, let me see what it's running, about 8, 9 psi, and you can just listen to it as I turn it up and down. Sometimes if you have it say at 8 psi, you're running it a long time and you're continuing to forge, you can actually turn it down to like about 5, and once the forge body heats up good. But yeah, that's it. It's very simple. Now I'm going to shut this down. It's the reverse of everything. You're going to reach up here and you're going to turn the ball valve off. Okay, now the actual fire is out there. So then the next thing is you always close this. That way it doesn't create a chimney effect with the heat and degrade the burner. So this burner is about 6 years old. It's actually held up extremely well, mainly because we close that after every forging session. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over, and you're not going to see me, but I'm actually going over here and I'm going to close both tank valves, okay? So for safety purposes, the tanks are here. If you have any issue or you can't get to closing this valve for some reason, if something gets too hot or there's an issue here, you can always walk over and shut off the two valves directly on the tanks, and that will also shut the forge down. Okay, let's get into a little bit more of the fun stuff, which is anvils and tooling. So this is an anvil, and this was donated by Sarah for the shop, and then Matt made this stand for it. So this is really a community team effort here. So this is an anvil. We can go pretty in depth about the tooling, but basically an anvil is a large piece of steel in this case, and with a flat work surface so that you can shape your steel on, okay? So it has some different components. You have the face of the anvil, the horn of the anvil, you have the party hole and pritchel hole is what they're called. So you have a tooling hole, and then you have a punching hole. And then this is tapered to give you better access if you're working a smaller piece at a certain angle that you can't really do here. These are hardened anvils, so one of the safety concerns with these is you have to be careful, because if you hit this directly with the hammer, your hammer can rebound up at a high velocity. So you have to kind of practice and be careful with that. Usually beginners aren't swinging hard enough to make that an issue, but as you get into it and you get more comfortable, and that can become just a safety concern you need to watch out for, okay? So let me demonstrate this tooling hole. So this is called a hot cut. It's a tool that fits in this square hole, just like that, right? You can actually cut hot steel by hammering it down on this tool and turning it. So you can put it in either way. One thing you want to do with safety, if you're using a hot cut or something like that, you always take it out after you're done cutting, because if you're actually standing here at the anvil and you're hammering, you see where your hand is, and that's a big safety issue there, right? Okay, so this hole itself is the punching hole. So you can actually punch hot holes in steel instead of drilling. So while it's hot, you use a handheld punch to drive through the steel, and this allows you to punch and drift. So you punch at the hole and you punch a little plug of steel out through there, and then you can run drifts. So a drift would look something like this. You forge this into a particular size that you want a hole to be in the middle. So after you actually punch your hole, you can run this through the hole of your steel, and it'll make it that size, and that's how you get accurate holes. But this is all the way through the anvil, so it allows you to drive it through, and it'll drop at the bottom. The horn itself, when you're making something like a hook, you can actually use this to shape your hook around it, and that's really what the horn is for. It's tapered, so you can do bigger or smaller circles and scrolls and things like that. Okay, I want to show you another version of an anvil that is a little different, and you may not see that often. So the base of this is actually called a striking anvil, and it's used for sledgehammer work. So I actually have a block of steel keyed in to the top of that so that people can forge on this block of steel. And then for sledgehammer work, we haven't really gotten into that, but that's what this is for. So let's talk about a vise here. The vise is one thing you're going to use a lot in the shop for holding your steel and bending it and doing different types of operations like that. And vise is pretty simple. It just rotates in and out. You can play around with that. Below the vise here is the water quench tank. You can quench your hot steel in there, especially if you're working with a long piece. You can actually turn it around and cool the end so you can continue to hold it and work it. Here's an example of tongs, and these are designed to hold hot metal. like that, right? So if you're working this in the forge and it's a short piece, you're going to actually need to hold it with tongs because you can't hold it with your hand anymore. If you're working a real long piece, it's just hot at the end, you can actually just hold it with your hand back here. The safety thing here is you have to make sure your metal is secure in your tongs, and each of these are designed differently to hold different types of steel. See the different shapes? Okay. If you don't hold it securely, say you tried to hold it with that and it's flopping around, that's very dangerous, because what will happen is you'll be holding it while you're hammering it, and let's say you hold it like that and you hit it and this bounces back up, flies out of the tongs and goes straight for your face. So I've had that happen. Luckily I was wearing safety glasses because I've been forging things before that flew up and hit my safety glasses. And you don't want a 2,000 degree piece of metal flying up and hitting you in the eye. Make sure whatever you're forging at the time, you've got the correct set of tongs and it's solid, rock solid both ways, up and down and sideways. And so there's a couple of different styles of hammer here. This is a rounding hammer, has a flat face and then a rounded face. We'll get more into why that's important in forging. This is called a cross peen. You see the shape of the end here, and this is good for spreading and different things, and then a flat face on the opposite side. Okay, that's really it for all the equipment in the shop. It doesn't take a lot to get started. You need the anvil, hammer, vise, tongs, forge, and that's really about it. And if you get to that stage and you need help, just let me know, and then we can get you what you need. Okay, so the other thing I'll talk about real quick is the material that we actually use in the forge. So we're primarily working with steel. This is a piece of steel. It's got a loop somebody forged on it. This is called square stock. So it's a square piece. And you can buy this. Steel is actually 99.8% iron. And it's got a little bit of carbon in it and a little bit of manganese. Steel's easy to work with. It's easy to buy and it's cheap. It's relatively cheap. Another thing I have here in the quench tank is a smaller ladle. So if you're just quenching the tip of your work when you're doing bending, you can bring that out. And I have it where it'll sit on a flat surface. So that's really it for equipment and everything. So the next step, I'm gonna put some shoes on, make sure I've got all the proper clothing on. I'm gonna clean up the shop, make sure there's no leaves or anything around the edges and the perimeter of the shop, and get my safety glasses. Always wear safety glasses. Okay, we have them available here for you if you need them. And then you can wear hearing protection if you want. It's good to have and it's good to wear to protect your hearing. Okay, let's talk about how we're gonna stand and work the steel at the anvil. So I've got my rounding hammer here. I've got my piece of steel. It's not hot yet, but I just want to show you how I work at this station. This anvil is actually a little bit low for me for working. What you want to do usually is put your arm at your side and make a fist, and this is the level where your anvil is going to be. This anvil is set up for more general forging for folks. That way we can get different heights in on it. So I usually get up pretty close into the anvil. I've got my steel here and I'm working it at this far edge. I've got it in my left hand, and on the right side here is where I'm working it. Because when I'm doing a taper, I want the hammer to be able to pat, like when I actually taper it, to pass off the side of the anvil. Because if you're here, you're going to hit the anvil before you get to your steel. Right, like that. Okay. This is the best way to show the angles we're going to be working with here while we're forging. So I've got the rounding hammer. You can see the round die and a flat die on it. We've got the flat face of the anvil looking forward. And the first step we're going to do is we're going to make a taper. So what's actually going to happen here is while I'm hammering this, okay, this is actually going to be up angled a little bit, slightly, and my hammer is going to be tilted slightly, okay? So what that's going to do is it's going to act as a bottom die and a top die, and it's going to force the steel into a point. Okay, my hammer is actually going to be coming straight up and down, but it's turned at an angle. I'm not coming in like this, I'm coming straight up and down, and those two things are going to force this into a point, and you'll see how that works in just a second. Okay, here's the angles. Okay, so now I'm actually going to extend this point by lowering the angle and hitting here. So right now I'm just cleaning this up. You're usually not working the steel below orange heat unless you're cleaning up. And what I mean by cleaning up is when I'm hitting it, the metal is not moving very much. So it can make very small adjustments to planish and clean up the forging. Okay, now, so I actually have a pretty decent taper. Okay, one of the things you're going to notice is I'm working this in a square. I'm turning at 90 degrees, hitting it, and turning at 90 degrees. So just about everything we do in forging is worked in a square like this. So it's turned square, I work it 90, 90, 90. You can hit it multiple times on one side. Like I'm just working down each side. And then when you want to turn it back to round, you actually forge down these sides by turning it up, and it turns it into an octagon. So I can work that a little more into an octagon and then take the sides off again and then keep working it into a round that way. And whatever you're doing on the top side is also being worked. So if I hit it with the hammer like this, the bottom side's being worked as well on the face of the anvil. It's smashing it between those two dies. Okay, so now we have a decent taper. I could clean this up a lot more if I wanted to, but that's a good start. Okay, I've changed the angle a little bit so you can see the next step. So I got my taper. I'm going to leave it pretty rough. I'm not going to refine it that much. Now we're going to make the first curl. This is the fun part. So I'm going to take this tip over the edge and I'm going to brush it down as I push it out over the edge. Now I got that, and then I'm going to come in and angle it right and brush it back. And now that's it. So you can rewatch that if you need to. But we're just pushing it over while we brush it down. And turning it over and bringing it back and brushing it backwards. And I'm changing the angle as I do it to get the proper curl. Okay, so for this next part, it's actually going to be very similar to the small curl, but we're going to make a loop for the hook on a larger scale, so you'll see very similar techniques. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this hot tip on here, and I'm going to quench that so it doesn't get distorted. So I'm just cooling it in water, just the very tip of it. And now we're going to do the same thing, brushing down, flip it over. Now I have a kind of a rough hook shape here, and I'm actually going to come all the way to the tip here of this corn. I'm going to finish shaping it on that. True it up. Okay, so there's a basic hook. You can make these in any shape or size you want. That's it. It's the same process for the small scroll and the same process for the large scroll. Alright, let's do some hot cutting here. Drop the hot cut in the tool holder. We're going to cut this off right about there. Get a little more heat on it. Careful with your hand here, like not hitting the metal, hot metal with it. So we get to this point, we can actually take a pair of tongs like this. You can just break that off. If you're hot cutting something, when you get toward the end of that cut, you want to stop and break it off or slow way down and cut it really easy. Because if you hit that, it can shoot it and launch it off at other people or somewhere across the room where there might be a flammable item or something that you're not aware of. So when you get toward the end of your cut, slow down and decrease the pressure on it. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tongs, and remember, holding things securely, these tongs have some lips in there that actually hold the hook this way. See how secure that is? So I'm going to take that, I'm going to tap the side of the hot cut, and that's going to unlock it. Now I can take the hot cut out. I'm going to set that to the side. And then now that I have my tongs, I can continue to work this end however I want to work it. Okay, so what I want to do on this end of the hook is I actually want to make a mounting plate. Just make a little tab here, that way we can mount it to a wall and we'll drill a hole in it. So I'm going to do what's called a half face blow here. And my hammer is going to be half on, half off the anvil. And I'm going to be hitting down. And you'll see what happens. So it's actually driving it down and making a flat plate. So then I can use my rounding hammer to pull different sides out to make this nice and round. And that's what's great about a rounding hammer is I can move it around, and depending on which angle that I hold this, it will actually move the metal in that way, right? So check that out. This is just one way to do it, and then this would mount to the wall. You can drill a hole in it, or you can punch a hole in it. You can do lots of different things, but for this purpose, to keep it simple, what we would do is we'd center punch and then drill a hole through that, and then we got a hook that we can mount. But one of the other things you want to do is you want to look at your hook, see if everything lines up, if the proportions are good, and then make any adjustments. And one of the things that I do to make sure it lays against the wall properly is I'll hold my hammer on here, and then I'll look and see if there's any air gaps where it would be sitting on the wall. So I want to move the bottom of this a little bit. So I actually like turn this around with the tongs. I could go back here and I could tap a couple times there. I can come hook it around the horn and make adjustments. Look and see if this is straight. Making any small adjustments I need to. Okay, so now I'm going to hold this again. And I think that looks good enough for our purposes. So that's a hook. And that's easy. You can make a set of these. You could rivet them all to another metal piece. You could have a coat rack. Just lots and lots of different projects. I encourage you to type in blacksmithing projects on YouTube and see what you like. One of the more important safety things, most people get burned when the metal is black hot and not orange, because you can't tell that it's hot. And if you leave it on the anvil, somebody might come along and just try to grab it and pick it up, and that's when you get burned. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this, we're gonna put it under the anvil while it cools. And that's where you wanna keep your hot metal. And then the other people working around, you know that anything under the anvil is potentially hot. Okay folks, thanks for watching the class here. I've shut down the forge based on the checklist that's on the wall there and made sure everything's good. There's nothing flammable. There's no hot metal sitting on anything flammable or near anything flammable. Another thing to note is every time you're done here, this is a community space, so I want you to clean everything up. Put your tongs back, put your hammer back in the rack. Make sure everything's ready to go for the next person. There's nothing worse than walking into your forging area and having to clean things before you start.